Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Natalie Jarvie. I'm the editor of Like and Subscribe, a newsletter from Angler Media about the big business of the creator economy. And today we are here to talk about the microdrama industry, which is having major impact on Hollywood. And we're going to get into all of that with this great group of panelists. So we've got Erin McFarlane, head of vertical content at Dhar Studios. Susan Rovner, who is the Chief Creative Officer of a company formerly known as MicroCo, and we're going to get into more about that shortly. We've got Scott Brown, who's CEO and founder of Second Rodeo Productions. And Jana Winograde, who is the CEO of the company formerly known as MicroCo. So, as I mentioned, microdramas, or we could call them micro series or vertical series. Maybe we could try to settle on a name together here on stage. That'd be great. These are short, vertically oriented series that are largely produced for pretty low budgets compared to most Hollywood productions. And they've been making waves in Hollywood for the last couple of years. One estimate puts revenue at $11 billion for last year. And there are a number of new players entering the space, including the soon-to-launch company here on stage right now. So we're going to roll a clip and talk about it a little bit more. So A Twist, you have a name. Congratulations. And by the way, you can read all about the new name and a really fun interview between Jana and Susan in my colleague Elaine Lowe's series business newsletter on the Angler. She broke the news about the name a little bit ago this morning. Jana, tell us about the name. How'd you settle on this?
Well, we're really excited about the name. First of all, as you could see by our pinwheel, it's really meant to be really energetic and fun and a nod to our storytelling device, which is twists and turns at every, twist of fate, a twist of the knife, really trying to get to what we're trying to do with our storytelling, which is surprise and delight the fans at every turn. And as you could see by the blue and red pinwheel, we're trying to really brand our platform. We're really trying to differentiate in the space and create a place for fans that is fun and energetic and that you want to return to over and over again. And then finally, it's really about, just a nod to how we're trying to differentiate ourselves, which is we're micro series, but with a twist.
So micro series, microdramas are a format that was popularized in Asia, but came to the U.S. pretty recently. And I would guess that a lot of you here probably learned about microdramas in the last year or so. It feels like when it's really taken off. So I thought it would be fun to start and have each of you tell us a little bit about when your light bulb moment hit around microdramas. Erin, you've been in the space a little bit longer than some of the folks here. When did you kind of have the moment of like, there's something here?
Absolutely. So I've led global content teams for, 10 plus years, and specifically in the last 5 years, really focused that on narrative and scripted content for female audiences. So really had my finger on the pulse of what is this, new exciting thing that's happening abroad. We are starting to see it really pick up, but it hadn't really been popularized in the Americas yet. Then in 2024, I began leading all broadcasting and production for a Chinese-based gaming company and was really tasked with coming in and leading not only all of their video productions, which is my background, but also this concept and idea they had that went from something talked about in a conference room, which was Salty TV, which I later led through global distribution, a vertical microdrama app of its own, and led all of their original programming and their slate design. And not only being a fan beforehand of that type of content, but then really being integrated into how it was developed and how it was produced and how quickly it moves, really for me thought, okay, this isn't something that's just a fad. It really is something that has this long-term scalability. It's made with such intentionality for fans and to really fit a mold of something that we saw missing from Hollywood for a long time, which was a lot of this content really geared toward female audiences, which was incredibly exciting, and something that was also fit towards, the shortening attention spans that we see in the modern world and really mobile-friendly audiences and behaviors. And so for me, that really clicked the more and more films that I conceptualized and produced, that this is something that really is going to be around for quite some time.
Susan?
My turn. So Jana and I have known each other for 3 years. We met on our very first day at ABC. It was both of our first days, and we instantly became best friends. We had separate careers, and Jana went on to head up all of business for ABC and Disney. I was president of Warner Brothers Television for 22 years. Then I was chairman of NBC Universal for 3 years. Jana was president of Showtime. And when we both left our jobs, we looked at each other and we said, we want to figure out how we can have fun again and how we can work together and actually focus on something that is expanding instead of contracting. Obviously, from our traditional backgrounds, the traditional Hollywood is very much in a moment of contraction. And it was over a year ago, we found Microdramas, and we do call it microseries, but we found Microdramas at the time. And we fell in love. There was so much about it that reminded us of our beginning days in Hollywood. And the risk was lower because the cost is lower. You know, when traditional Hollywood suddenly is spending $80 million for one series, the risk is so high. The barrier to entry and the barrier to take a risk is so high. It stops being as fun. So, for us, this really felt like a place of growth. This felt like a place where we can make fantastic shows that we're really proud of and really build something together.
So I consider myself a filmmaker first, but I've been in digital my whole career. It's been a really good home. I've done things like executive produced Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's YouTube channel, where I also wrote and directed a musical with Lin-Manuel Miranda and various sketches and unscripted content. I had produced 2 of Mr. Beast's biggest videos in North Carolina in 2023, and after having done that, I kind of climbed to the top of unscripted YouTube mountain, and I still love scripted storytelling. I love working with actors. I love telling stories in narrative, right? So I came back to LA and I was going to figure out something, maybe even become a writer's assistant, because I just really wanted to. There hasn't really been a lot of digitally native formats up until recently, right? So about 2 years ago, I learned about, at the time they were called short dramas, verticals. And when I read that audiences were paying north of $15 knowingly to watch what amounted to a 90-minute narrative experience with no known actors and no known intellectual property behind it, I thought, oh, wow, maybe that moment is here that I've been waiting for, where digitally native formats would really start to become big. And if you contextualize this moment inside of Dhar, inside of Alan Chicken Chow, inside of the group chat, inside of all these other formats that are now happening, it really became undeniable that to pursue what I really love, which is creating narrative programming in digital, this was the place to double down.
So Susan shared a little bit about our origin story, but when I left Showtime in 2023 and Susan left NBC, we actually spent a lot of time together figuring out first individually what we thought we wanted to do. And then once we realized, hey, let's do this together, trying to figure it out. And one of the mottos that we always had in our head, because we love a good motto, was you can't have the business without the show, but you also can't have the show without the business. And our industry had gotten to this place where we were all so mired down in this content escalation that was going on at the time, which was just driving up prices and making it so hard to really take risks and produce in a fun way, as Susan said, but also in a way that made economic sense. And so when we came upon Microdramas, it really was a win-win. It's the show and the business. On the show side, you're telling these great stories that people really want. I mean, the love of storytelling never changes. People's desire for certain kind of stories never changes. What changes is the way they watch them. And so this really incredible format that is totally native to mobile vertical storytelling is incredible, but also the economics make sense. It's low risk, but also one of the things you don't have in long form television is you have no signals. You're spending tens of millions of dollars without knowing if it's going to work. That's why they call it a hit driven business. But with microdramas, once you have a platform, you really start to understand who's your audience, what are the signals, what are the stories that work. So while it's low risk from a financial standpoint, it also becomes low risk from just the standpoint that you kind of understand more what your chances are of success. And we looked at that. We were like, we got the show and the business. We fell in love with it and really just put our heads down and tried to figure out then how we could meet the audience need and differentiate ourselves in the space.
So it was around this time last year that my colleague at the Ankler, Elaine, and I both started hearing a lot about microdramas. We started to hear about people who were working on them, people who were interested in working on them, and we decided to write a story about it. And it was not long after that that Jana and Susan, you announced MicroCo at the time with some big partners. And it did feel like that kind of was like the moment we were like, oh, like this is like taken off. And like then a number of other folks in Hollywood announced projects. Dhar Mann Studios announced their big move into the space, which we'll get to a little bit later, earlier this year. I'm curious, and Jana, maybe you can kick us off here. Why do you think microdramas had such a moment last year? What happened that kind of created this?
I think it was a combination of things. People always use the word perfect storm, but you had this situation where there was a huge business in Asia, and then demand was really starting to grow in the United States. So demand was really starting to be proven. And then at the same time, you had all of the consolidation that was going on and everything going on in Hollywood, which resulted in a tremendous number of layoffs and honestly could be a little depressing.
A lot of depressing.
Yeah. And then when you take that and you combine it with sort of a storytelling and exciting way of telling stories that's new and meant exactly for where the consumer is going, I feel like those three things, when you put them together, and then when you guys started reporting on it and all of the business press started reporting on it and the trades, it sort of turned into this snowball effect. And I would say it was all of those factors that combined to just be the perfect storm of launching this into the zeitgeist.
Can I jump in? Is that okay? Also, I think, Jana said some of this already, which is people love all types of genres, but what happens is at a certain point, Hollywood stops making them for various reasons. So Hollywood stopped making romances, mid-level romances. They were not cost effective to market them. Then soaps. And truthfully, I was at NBC Universal and we moved Days of Our Lives over to Peacock. There were all these soap operas that were so much a part of people's daily lives and their stories were moving or disappearing. And I think what microdramas showed is people desperately wanted that content and they were offering it to them. And again, as Jana said, like the need for every type of genre never goes away. There's an audience and there's a fandom for it. And you have to meet the audience where they were and where they are. And if big Hollywood is not going to make a fantastic romance story and a sexy female-led romance, someone else is going to make it because the audience still wants it. And I think that's a lot of what also micro series or dramas have done.
So I think before the rise of micro series, the closest thing we probably saw to this was what Quibi tried to do and what Go90 tried to do. I've seen a lot of comparisons. Microdramas are like Quibi. Quibi didn't work. What is that going to mean for microdramas? Scott, tell us why this isn't Quibi. Why is this different?
I think there are a number of reasons. I mean, I made a show for Quibi in 2019. And one of the things, I think that the first thing that you have to realize is they were trying to train an audience behavior. And that's, I imagine, very, very hard to do. But I think one of the reasons that microdramas are taking off now is because, to a degree, storytelling is a chemical thing. And what TikTok and YouTube Shorts has done to our brains is taught us that, once that algorithm learns you, it will entertain you immediately basically every single minute with content that you find interesting. And I think that habituates and rewires our brains to expect the sensation of storytelling immediately and every single minute. Now, what I think these microdrama apps have been very successful at doing is really chasing the data and following the user behavior to the point of, okay, audiences actually would like longer stories told in roughly 60 to 90 second chapters. I actually remember being at Quibi, and an executive there mentioned to us that it seems like the data wants the episodes to be shorter, but what could they possibly want? 1 minute episodes? And it turns out, yeah, they kind of do. And I think that that speaks to this moment is different because the audience is able to speak and assert what they want, and these apps have met them where they are. And now it's undeniable that this is a kind of format that they love. And because of that audience behavior being realized already, this is completely different. And the fact that we see, again, contextualize it again in what's happening in the larger creator economy, where you have Dhar Studios, you have these other things that I mentioned. The audience loves digitally native scripted formats. And that combined with the audience behavior, I think, is why this moment is very different.
So, Erin, I'm curious, as the person here who has been working in this space the longest, how does it look different right now with a lot of attention, a lot more money flowing into the space? Yeah. How have you seen it evolve in the last couple of years?
It's been a really exciting journey. I was in it early, and I did see a lot of, as everybody here has spoke to, really a sort of format that we saw starting abroad in mainland China and being brought here. And as we know, localization really goes above and beyond just language. And we still see that passion here in the Americas for that type of content and for that soap opera content and for that genre and for the different tropes, trends, and subject matters that is popular abroad. But now we're also seeing, a lot of, just as every single country has their own market, we're seeing a lot of Western market type of content as well. And I think that that's also led to a bigger boom here in the United States because we're starting to see content that reflects tropes and trends and subject matter that, has been missing. We have been missing the rom-coms. We've been missing a lot of those things that we got in the early 2000s, and now these are coming back, and we see a lot of more excitement and kind of mainstream acceptance of that, which is really exciting. And I think just as word of mouth and, more audiences are discovering this, there's just a lot more studio participation. There's a lot more kind of acknowledgement from the Hollywood sphere, which has been very exciting. Now, when I speak about what I do, there's a lot more knowledge and nodding versus people wondering what it is. So for us, it's a lot of possibility and a lot of potential that maybe wasn't always felt there in my early years of being within this type of microdrama content. And so really the kind of opportunities are endless in the space. We're really learning what it means to be scrappy in terms of production. And it's really just almost rewarding the folks that have that very innovative, creative mindset of, we have this wonderful idea. We have this passion for the demographic that wants this type of content. And now we're really going to remove the barriers of kind of a traditional media scope of a 6 to 10 month development cycle. And we're just going to create content for the people that really want it. And I think removing those barriers and blockades is something I've seen more recently versus a few years ago when you had to convince folks to get on board with this type of content.
Yeah, so the company that you now work for, Dhar Studios, big YouTube presence, recently announced a huge deal with Fox Entertainment to produce 40 microdramas. It's a lot of content, even when it's micro. Yeah. And so you're really taking advantage of that excitement that you're feeling. Tell us a little bit more about that deal. I will say from my standpoint, what I thought was really innovative about it was that Dhar Studios is retaining all of the rights to the projects. It's essentially a distribution licensing deal that you've done. You've got some support from Fox. It feels really transformational, not just for microdramas, but also for the creator economy. So tell us a little bit more about it.
It was really exciting. So we had a lot of potential partners come to us. And so for us, it was a privilege. And we went forward with these discussions with a lot of intentionality and really knowing that we've been around that digital scripted world for quite some time. And we really have a loyal audience base, over 160 million subscribers across all of our platforms. And for us, really surprising and delighting that community and those followers, it means a lot to us. And so being able to retain creative autonomy, which we do in our deal, was a big deal because we know the types of stories we want to tell. Yes, we know they're going to be different than what you may see on YouTube on our current channels, but we also really want to be cognizant of keeping the authenticity of our brand and the heart and soul of what we enjoy, the stories that resonate with us and our community, but also fitting those and adjusting those to work in the vertical microdrama space. For us, we were just really blown away by Fox's innovation and their excitement at creating something at scale for us. And so that's something that meant a tremendous amount. We didn't sign to create 1 or 5 or 10 films. We really started with an initial slate of 40. And as somebody who has done slate design for quite a few years for vertical microdramas, that was exciting to me. And to be able to come in and bring that past expertise and allow us all to create things that, you know, each of those 3 partners was tremendously excited by.
So Jana and Susan, when you showed us the sizzle for A Twist, you kind of walked us through kind of how you want to set yourself apart. When you decided to enter this space last year, there were already a lot of apps out there. I mean, there's like 40 something in the App Store today. And there's a few that have kind of risen to the top, My Drama, Real Short. You probably heard about some of those names. But what was the opportunity that you were seeing that made you feel like, okay, we could carve out our own space here?
We look to each other and say, you doing it? Okay. I'll start. So, you know, there is an incredible fandom, as we know, for the current genre that most micro series are, which is romance. And the fandom's real and it's incredible. And the apps that, are out there right now really do a fantastic job of marketing to that fandom and bringing those fans over to their platforms. We've spent our entire career going to many fandoms and understanding where different fandoms live. And I know for a lot of the current apps, you know, they may put up one horror and it doesn't do very well, and then they stop it and they just stay with what they know. We believe, and we'll find out if we're right, but I believe we are right, that it's about, if you're going to put on a horror micro series, you need to go to that audience and tell them it's there. And that's what we've spent our career doing. So we believe that we're going to broaden out the genres that are being offered by actually bringing that fandom in, targeting that fandom, making sure that they're aware of these shows and honoring that fandom. That is something that we think is incredibly important. When I was at Warner Brothers, we built out the whole DC comic universe. We built out our whole presence at Comic-Con, leaning into fandoms and community and offering all of that to them is really what we want to set us apart. And when you come on to our app, as Jana said, we're trying to build a brand so that when you come onto our app, you feel the respect that we have for you. We are offering you lots of different things. We understand, again, what fandom and community means, and really kind of, once you come on, we don't want you to leave, and we want to respect your time, and we don't want to, we don't view this as a money grab. We don't view this as a fad. We view this as building fandom.
I'm glad you're taking us to the content. Jana, did you want to?
I was just going to add one other thing, which is because we've been in traditional media for so long and we have relationships with a lot of studios and platforms, I think one of the things that we also feel like we have the opportunity to do that can really differentiate ourselves is figure out how to create more durable IP. So when you're making something, not just, okay, we're going to put this up and then we're going to do something else when it's over, and it may be very similar, but it's different. Really try and lean into what people love, which is falling in love with characters, falling in love with series, and then staying with them. So that's what soap operas were. That's what ongoing series are. And our understanding is that there can sometimes be a lot of drop off. And as people are walking into the micro series space, they start watching, they come in, but they may not finish. And we feel like as storytellers, going back to those tenets of storytelling, emotion, plot, character, that get you to the end of 7 years or 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, I did Supernatural. That was 15 years. So
that we're hoping we can, or pretty sure we're going to get people to the end of 60 to 90 minutes because we're telling real stories that people care about and that with characters that people really lean into.
I'm glad you're taking us toward the content because that's where I wanted to go next with this conversation. I think there has been a bit of a desire in Hollywood in particular to kind of like look down on microdrama content in the first few years that this has really kind of made a name for itself. It is ultra low budget, very small sets, often non-union workers, actors you've never seen before in anything but maybe another microdrama. You talk about kind of the storytelling. What it's known in this space is tropes. There's a lot of tropes. There's a lot of secret billionaires and werewolves and all sorts of things. And once a trope takes off, it will just kind of get reiterated over and over again by different apps, different storytellers, but it's the same kind of story. There's been a lot of talk about elevating micro series content. And I think it's worth having a discussion about how you do that while still respecting the format that people clearly really enjoy. So I want us to dig into that. But first, I felt like it would be fun to play another clip that we have, a trailer for, Scott, your new series, Playback, which premiered on Friday on My Drama. And I think this is a good example of something that's kind of taking what people know and love about microdramas and elevating it slightly. You've got some recognizable faces in this project. It's also, I think, the first ever musical microdrama. So let's watch it now and then we can talk about it. So the thing that first stood out to me about that trailer when I watched it is that you actually have the names of all of your cast in there, which I think there's a lot of people who act in microdramas who are kind of nameless to people who watch them. And there's a handful who've broken out. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Tell us a little bit about your goals for this project.
Well, it's our second really ambitious microdrama that we made. We made a show called The Diamond Rose last year that broke a lot of the rules that at the time were the prevailing wisdom about shows. We had contrasty lighting. We had certain acts of subtlety. We had a story that really concluded and you had to watch all the way in for. But throughout this whole process, I've always said to our teams, and I'm not saying this is easy, but we're not trying to make a Netflix show in a vertical aspect ratio. We're trying to make a great vertical series. And I think that mindset from the jump is really important, right? I think when you talk about Quibi, that's one of the problems is like they were trying to shove television into digital formats, and that doesn't work. It's really when you elevate what's working, and you meet where the audience where they are. I think is so important. We also wanted to attract some notable names. We have Hannah Stocking on our series. Hannah's a Forbes top 50 creator. She has 78 million total followers. We also have Philip DeFranco and Samir Chaudhry, who are from the creator economy. But also we have, when it comes to elevating, right, for example, when I talk to my actors, I said, I want you to follow your instincts, but I want you to allow yourself as much as you can within your craft to migrate to the boldest choices of those instincts, right? So that's because you have to grab the audience by the lapels. You have to hold on to them, especially in the first 20 episodes. You got to get them through a paywall. And after that, I think you can start to slow down. That's actually something I learned at Mr. Beast is, Jimmy, when you first start Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast, when you start working with him, he brings you in if you're a senior producer and he says, a lot of people think I go to a 10 and I stay at a 10 and the video ends. It's not what I do. I go to a 10, yes, and then I keep them at like an energetic 10, but then I slow things down so that I can introduce deeper things to the audience that ultimately pay off in the end. And so we tried to apply really those retention mechanics to this show. And even in the writing, right? It's really fun to endeavor to make a great microdrama on the writing level because you have to introduce a plot point every single minute. And that's a really rewarding challenge. But then what it does is, and in your third act, and I do view these as like a 3-act movie in a way, with its own rules, if you then pay off all those threads that you were forced to create, one of the things I'm really proud of with Playback, and the early data is already showing it, we have a really satisfying series of moments in the ending because there were so many things planted in the beginning and they just organically pay off and they pay off and they pay off and they pay off. So at every turn, how can we make a great version of what audiences love? And it's in that intent as you apply the creative process that I think you end up with something elevated.
So it's only been a weekend, but how's it going so far? How's the response been?
I mean, it seems like it's going great. I mean, Hannah Stocking just was so... I say when you work with creators, it's really important that you if you're relying on the contract and the promotion and the contract, you're usually getting into some trouble there. But if you make something that they want to show, I say their parents and their best friend, because that's how they think of their audience as their best friends, right? Often, you're going to have some success. And Hannah's been promoting it really heavily. And the show, we had a physical premiere, in LA on Wednesday, and the audience there, tremendous response. And, by all indications, it seems that we're doing very well.
Hannah plays a really fun, kind of juicy, villainous character.
Yes.
So I'm sure she had fun with that one. You can tell.
Oh, so much fun. And I mean, I, as a director, I have never been more proud of anything I've made. And I would say that in the making of this, I had a transformative artistic experience as a person. And I believe that ends up on screen, but filtered through the strategic needs of the format. And I think that passion and that energy, I told the cast, your number one rule is to have fun. Make sure that you're having fun so the audience had fun, right? I tell people, and for anyone who's a filmmaker, a storyteller, anything you've ever set out to do and that you dream of doing, I swear, because I know it, you can do it in this medium. And that, I think, is the most important thing to share with the audience.
So it's interesting. I think you're all approaching this space a little bit differently. And so it's fun to have you all up here. Erin, when I started thinking about creators who could get into the vertical series, micro series space, Dhar Mann was one of the first that I thought of, because Dhar Mann Studios already was making scripted content for YouTube, for Facebook, that felt like it had a lot of the story beats that you would find in micro series to begin with, just not vertically shot and done a little bit differently. And I'm curious if you can speak to like how you're thinking about taking what people kind of know and love from Dhar Mann content and porting it into the micro series experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first and foremost, we are going in there with just the celebration and respect for what is working on our existing platforms and what is working for our existing community. However, really with that knowledge of the demographic switch. And so on each of our platforms, naturally on any social platform, the demographic and the percentage of the watchers is going to be different. And so we know traditionally with vertical microdramas, in the demographic is typically, females anywhere from 25 to 55. That is growing rapidly. And with the introduction of other genres and other subject matter, we see that continue to grow. But for us, especially starting out, we really wanted to ensure that we were servicing and really delighting the individuals within our own community that already watch microdramas, that really love that type of subject matter. So we did extensive research and surveys to really best understand how can we bring them the type of, stories that they're really wanting right now that they might already be loving, but how can we do that with a lot of personalization and intentionality and make sure that we are still breaking through the noise, that we are still being very innovative. And at the, in a 360-degree way, it's always still bringing the heart that we know from the Dhar Mann Studios brand and really making sure that all of our happily ever afters hit the hardest, that we are still being very intentional with, having those paybacks for those characters and making sure that their arcs are very, very satisfying. I think that's very important in microdramas. It's also important for us at Dhar Mann Studios. And so making sure those really pivotal beats while staying really close to the community and being able to shift our content quickly based on what's working and not working is going to be very big for us as we continue to produce. And then beyond that of just ensuring that, at every point that we are really putting entertainment and engagement at the forefront, which is very similar to what we do with our existing production engine at Dhar Mann Studios.
Susan, you told my colleague Elaine that you're mining the made-for-TV movies of the 90s for some of your micro series. How are you thinking about both of you, Susan and Jana, like your years making wonderful, great, entertaining television, and how do you take those lessons and apply them to microdramas, micro series?
One thing that we believe in strongly is quality does not mean expensive. Quality means great storytelling. And that is something we've done our entire career. And yes, we met actually at ABC when we were in the TV movie department a long time ago. And I do think that's one of the other things that micro series are actually playing into. It used to be a long time ago in the 90s where ABC was making 30 to 40 television movies a year. And those movies had fantastic titles, by the way, things like She Woke Up Pregnant, things like 2 Came Back. By the way, 4 went out, only 2 came back. There were fantastic things that we did. And again, the audience loved them. And then historically, people moved away from them. A lot of them, by the way, were true crime. You see the rise on true crime now on Netflix and documentaries. So anyway, we do realize there's just such a huge fandom for this, and we do bring some of that knowledge and the love that we had in the beginning of our career to this. But for us, the key is in building a platform and a studio is that quality storytelling that will take people all the way through to the end. And that applies to any genre, anything that you're doing. We will not like loop a story unnecessarily so that we can take your money. We want to tell a great story worthy of your time so that you want to complete it and you want to watch the next one. So that's our goal.
So let's talk a little bit about what these productions actually look like, because I think a lot of people here may not know. I've been lucky enough to be on the set of a microdrama, so I've seen it firsthand. But, you know, given that we hear a lot about how low budget they are, how does that materialize on set? What does that actually look like? Where are the costs being cut? Where's AI being used? The set I went to didn't have a great craft services. That's where I imagine some of the budget is being cut. Open question.
So we finished one recently. You know, it's not that different than, I think the physical production of these is probably the most similar to independent film. We did a 3-camera shoot. I usually run a 3-camera set, to just get through quickly. We shot the whole thing in 7 days. And we had a small pickup. Mm-hmm. The crews are lean, but we lean into digital workflows a lot. And then especially, speaking to AI, we were actually partnered with a company called Luma AI on this series. You know, AI right now, I think is, using it as a little bit of a slot machine. You have to pull on a little bit, do a lot of prompts in order to get something that's useful. But especially like at the end of playback, our main character plays at one of the biggest music festivals in the world, and we could never have realized that without the use of AI. It's a speed tool right now. We'll see where it goes. But overall, you hire people who understand the independent film mindset, to understand what the set's going to be like, and you just get to work and get it done.
And I'll expand on that, especially from the time frame aspect. I think where we're seeing a lot of efficiencies is really on the time. And so traditionally microdramas work on a 3 to 4 month time frame. And so in doing slates and doing multiple, you can usually stack them. So you do multiple, at once. So at the end of a 3 to 4 month period, instead of just having one completed film, you can have multiple. And so typically this can be personalized, but you do about 1 month of writing, 1 month of pre-pro/filming, and 1 month of post. Naturally, you can, slot a few weeks here and there based on the length of the IP and the complexity of the IP. But that's where you're getting a lot of that. When we think about, how this is different and how the cost savings are there, we're not really being hit with the traditional media 10 months to 2 years of writing and cycling and green lighting where something may come out, it may not, it may be shelved forever. And so what's very fascinating about this type of concept is you're able to really test simply by creating. So you really create an entire film and you put it out there, and those learnings, whether if something was wildly successful or in the off chance that maybe it didn't reach quite as many as you hope, you still walk away with those learnings to apply to your next screenlighting. And so that's where we see a lot of that time and funds come back, is you're really cutting out that entire space and you're really just moving forward and doing. I agree with Scott in terms of the scrappiness, and kind of you have these teams that are very innovative, that are very knowledgeable, a lot of independent filming teams, a lot of teams that are very used to kind of doing a lot of different roles, but your quality remains exceptionally high and the thresholds for that remain exceptionally high, and you film within a 1 to 2 week period.
One other thing I'd love to also bring up, and I agree with everything said. I actually think, coming from a more traditional world, there's so much to learn on a micro series set to bring to the traditional world. I actually think there's an opportunity to change a lot of things in a positive way in the traditional world, to learn to bring down costs, to allow more production to happen. I have to say, I have learned so much being on all of our sets, and we've now produced a lot. And there's an efficiency. There's very much a mentality of we're all in this together. It's a bit more like an independent film. People really understand their job, and people take it seriously, and people get it done. And there's just a lot less waste. And I do think it's going to be interesting. I feel like this industry has potentially may change traditional media with the approach.
There've been some efforts to unionize microdrama sets. I know SAG has an agreement now. Can microdramas work? Can the budgets make sense if it moves toward more unionization?
I think the unions are going to have to change. I think that's the issue, right? And I think they're going to have to.
I'm happy you said it.
I mean, I'm from the creator economy. Like, we haven't. I think there's a lot of. I think one of the great things that the creator economy has realized is that you have to do things in a new way. The world is changing in ways that it's never changed before, but like the fundamental idea that creative people should have protections for them in a commercial art form fundamentally makes sense. I think that's important. But if we're going to rely on business models that were successful in the 2000s to define the working practices of today, I think we're going to encounter a lot of headwinds. I support the idea of guilds and unions, but they're going to have to change with the times. And that's where, and I think the vertical agreement from SAG represents thoughtful thinking in that direction. We'll see what others follow.
All right. I said we were going to do it. Let's do it right now. What are we going to call this format of content moving forward? Jana, I'll start with you.
Microseries.
All right. Scott.
I think verticals will take over.
Yeah. I'm going to say microseries, but verticals might as well. I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, I'm verticals.
Okay. All right.
What's hard for those of us that come from the traditional space is vertical has such a different meaning. So you're talking about verticals and then you're like, but we're going to do different verticals of content within our vertical productions. I find it really confusing.
In the same way that television can have all kinds of different formats, right? Like that's how I think of it too, is like, it's like all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. Like all microdramas are verticals, but not all verticals are microdramas, right? And so maybe it's both actually, that the medium is vertical, but the format is microseries.
I also think, and we know already that lots of places do this, I think a lot of verticals may actually be shot horizontal to protect for other ways of distribution. So that's the other thing too.
We actually do that, but not necessarily for the horizontal distribution, but because, I mean, especially with full frame technology and, the camera systems we have at NAB, it's like, I mean, why not? I mean, especially when camera operators have to keep a close up in a vertical frame, it's tough. And if you have that leeway to move back and forth a little bit in post, it can really help out.
It seems pretty clear that drama needs to be dropped from the name of these projects.
For sure.
Because, as we've talked about a little bit here, but should say more explicitly, there's so much innovation happening in the genre of microseries right now. A lot of people trying different things in true crime, in thrillers and horrors, in unscripted. I'm going to work harder to program myself not to say microdrama. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening.